three hands. So, so welcome everybody. As everybody's coming into the stream, I'm going to retweet one thing, and then after the retweet, we're going to jump into our topic of the night. So, I hope everyone's been watching some of the pre. Have you been watching the what is it called? The preview. This preview streamers. Have you been watching that?
Most of the preview stuff has just been me moderating for Smitty.
So Smitty is a great streamer. He got early access to the MTG, War of the Spark cards, and so he's been building decks all day. And so, it's been great watching him play. I got to watch some of the interactions of cards. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit if we have some time. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about since War of the Spark is coming out, there's all of these products. There's the War of the Spark, the set, which everybody wants to get a little bit of that. There's the War of the Spark Mythic Edition. There's Gideon's Spellbook. There are Japanese anime planeswalkers that people are going to want to get. And so there's just so many things that, there's the $50 arena 50 packs thing that is coming out. Like, think about all the stuff that we have to buy, and we don't have to buy it, but think about all the stuff we want to buy. And then right around the corner is Modern Horizons. So there's quite a bit of action happening here. And the topic that we want to talk about is a topic that my friend Zuko here, introducing Zuko. Let's introduce you before we introduce the topic. Hi, Zuko. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm no one in specific. I've just been a Magic the Gathering player for the better part of a decade, going back to the tail end of Alara Reborn and right around M10 and Zendikar. So I've been around from just before the Magic scene as a whole just exploded around Zendikar and Scars of Mirrodin to Ravnica 2 and where we're at now.
Would you say you love Magic?
I love the game. It's my favorite game that I've played, including the more than $1,000 that I've put into League of Legends. It doesn't pale in comparison to how much I'm in love with Magic the Gathering.
I think a lot of people do. I think if a lot of people love it, if they analyze their, some people outright say it like you did, but I think that if you look at your motivations and your, what you think about and stuff like that, you'll find that you love the game. And so I'm happy to be here with nobody specific, as he described himself, to talk about Magic the Gathering, a game that he loves and that we want to play and not go broke, right?
Yeah, as I said before, that's $1,000 into just one video game, and who knows how many countless hundreds, if not thousands, into maybe a paper game.
Right.
So start sitting down and going through all the receipts, and you've spent $50 on getting 5 packs. The rares weren't even that good. Your sealed pool is garbage. You don't have much to show for it aside from a skeleton of a commander deck that you've been building, quote unquote, for 5 years. And you have nothing to show for it, and all this money hasn't been used effectively.
Well, maybe there's a lot of smart people out there doing good things with their money and getting the most for their dollar when they're doing Magic the Gathering, right? And so that's what we want to talk about today, is basically with all these products coming into the fold, how can you play the game without going broke? So this is a topic that Zuko was super interested in. Like I said, he brought this nice outline to talk about. And so the way we're going to do it is we're going to talk about just kind of like some holistic things about budgeting, about the hobby itself, and just kind of like a way to approach it. And then we're going to launch into talking specifically about War of the Spark and the barrage of products that are coming out. And then after that, we're going to kind of jump into other formats and other ways that you can enjoy the game that, of course, are going to include War of the Spark cards or other things. But they are, what would you say, more relaxed about like how much money you're going to spend. So we'll talk about those relaxed ways that you can jump into the game and enjoy it just as much. So
let's get into it.
Let's get into it, man. So one of the things here, you say, talk about a budget, right? You think that maybe a budget is a good idea. Now, budgeting is something I'm not very good at. But I love that you put there's a Bible scripture you put here, and I don't know if you meant to talk about that, but we're gonna read it here. It's a scripture that is super. Now this is not a Bible podcast. This is a Magic the Gathering podcast.
The only Bible stuff we got going in, just because I know that John is down with that kind of stuff, and
Right.
I felt it was.
I love
given
it. I love it. I love it. I super appreciate the Bible, and I feel like without getting super preachy, I will just say this, and it's going to sound like boom, But I feel like the Bible is the revelation of who God is, and so that's my book. But this, you don't have to be religious to hear these words and be like, that's good advice. Okay, so this is just good advice that it's just good advice. I'm going to read it so you can hear it, and then you'll say, oh yeah, that's good advice. Here it goes. It says, suppose that you want to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay a foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and was not able to finish. And so it's just good advice for life, right? You don't want to start something that you're not going to be able to finish. And we know that with the EDH decks that we talked about, right? You got the shell of the EDH deck, or you got it almost done, but you weren't able to finish it because you could not afford to get a Cabal Coffers, or you could not afford to get Microsynth Lattice or something like that. And I'm all for doing things at a piece at a time, but I think this advice is just good advice. Like, let's look at how much money do you have to work with for the game of Magic, and then figure out how you're going to enjoy the game with that money, instead of letting Magic just dictate to you how much money you're going to spend, right? Because think about all these products. I mean, if you just say, my wallet's open, like, what is that meme? Like, shut up and take my money, right? They're going to do it, man. They're going to take it all.
Damn the consequences. I'm getting the Mythic Edition now. Oh, wait, that's my landlord knocking at the door.
Would you ever do that?
When I was younger, that actually did happen.
Really?
Around.
What did you buy?
It was during the Dragons of Tarkir, and it was just getting all the Dragon Lords, and my $100 rent to my parents was up, and I literally had 50 cents to my name because I blew everything getting these Dragon Lords at the height of their popularity.
Okay, so you bought Dragon Lords at the height of their popularity, and this was rent that you owed your parents, right? Okay, did they kick you out, or did they let you slide?
Well, they were just really harsh about it. It's like this was back, what, about 7 years ago,
Yeah.
when Dragon's Kit came out. I was about 20 at that time, and that was my first real introduction to getting into this whole budget and finance stuff outside of personal stuff, but just getting into the Magic budget itself.
Right. When you were buying the Dragon Lords, did you know you were doing something wrong?
In hindsight, but it was just a purely emotional purchase, and that's what gets people into a lot of trouble, both in life in general. I need the new car, I need the apartment that's fancier than the one I can realistically afford, and it even bleaches into the Magic stuff. I need to be able to get the most hardcore modern deck, or I need the most cool standard cards now. But if you're not able to fiscally do that without harming yourself, then you're just setting yourself up for even more cataclysmic failure.
Yeah, it could get serious, the amount of money people spend on Magic. What I will say is this: for the budget situation, I'm not going to have a lot of advice on that because I'm really bad at budgeting. But what's made me better at budgeting is that I do this for a living. So I can't just spend infinite money on without having money to buy cards. Because one of the big things that I do a lot of is buying cards, and so I need to have lots of money for that. And I do, by the way. If you want to sell your cards, please bring them my way. There's no budget there. We're gonna buy them all. but what I'm saying is that I'm not gonna have a lot of advice for that. But I will say that it is good to figure out what you want to spend beforehand, and that will help you keep control of what you do spend. So, one of the things you alluded to was hardcore, modern deck, and I think this is a trap that a lot of people fall in. You put here on the outline, competitive versus hobby. Tell us what you're thinking there.
Well, it's more in line of when we make that first transition. If we got into the game with a purely social group of, I can just speak from my own experience of I got into the game via Duel of the Planeswalkers. So
Hmm.
it would be just me and a couple of online friends from Xbox Live. It would just be jamming games against each other. And sure, the game itself cost between $5 to $10 USD, but there was no initial investment beyond that. We were still able to get tons of games, and hours upon hours of just grinding the cards themselves, regardless of their secondary market value, of
Hmm.
just the pure joy of playing games with people and keeping that purely as just as a game itself, versus when you hear about the Star City circuit, when you watch your first Pro Tour or Mythic Championships or
Hmm.
whatever we're calling it nowadays, getting introduced into the higher tier echelons of competition and collection building. Of you log onto Twitter and you just see binders full of foil Japanese and Korean cards. Like, oh my lord, that's cooler than my 15 commons that I got last night. I want into this, and you just get more emotionally invested, which of course means more financially invested.
Right, right. Your wallet will follow whatever your desires are, or whatever your heart. Like I can relate to that because when I first started, this was the worst thing that I ever did. Not the worst thing I ever did. Come on, let's be honest. But like for hyperbole's sake, in the podcast sake, we'll just say the worst thing I ever did.
Now,
This is the worst thing I ever did was to look at. It was called, and I don't like using this word, but I'm going to use it because that's what it was called. It was called the pimp thread, and what it was a thread on the source, and all they were showing was Japanese foil, legacy decks, and so Japanese foil legacy and Japanese foil vintage decks, and they had them all altered, and like this was like probably 12 years ago, 10 years ago. So this is like a decade ago. So this was before Japanese was easy to get. It was super hard to get because it wasn't sold in the United States. And so a lot of that stuff had to get imported and stuff like that. And so I would look at that stuff and I wanted it so bad at the time. I wanted it so bad and I was just drawn to it. And so what I ended up doing is that's how I learned how to trade. Okay, I learned how to trade because I said, I can't afford this stuff. And so the best way that I can do, the best way I can get it, the way I can acquire it is by learning how to value trade, how to deal, and then I'm going to like become a good dealer or trader and then I'm going to get these cards, right? And the rest is history. I did that. I went to town, I learned all the tricks, all the skills and here I am later doing it for a job, but I feel that, identify with that. Man, I want that. I see it and I want it. So, so I think it's important to like you said, delineate. It's okay for it to be a hobby, right? It's okay for it to be a hobby. You don't have to, um, you don't have to go ultra, super ultra with it. But I think also we'd be untruthful to say that there isn't like this innate human desire to improve something, right?
clearly that's the drive, like that's the prime market driver of what drives new car sales. Of my 1998 Corolla just simply is not good enough. I must get the new
And
2019 Sentra.
right, it is like it feeds right into like capitalism and like buying, 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 right? But I think it's also just something that's innately human. Like if people want to improve themselves, it doesn't cost them any money. They want to like work out or they want to learn something, knowledge and other things that you're trying to improve. You're trying to make something better than it was before. And marketing has keyed into that, and they say, "Oh well, your thing is not good enough. You need to buy the new Corolla, or you need to upgrade your Corolla with this stuff." And it's the same kind of thing, right? And Magic has the same thing to it, where it's like you have a deck, but you got to improve it. And then they have rotation, which is like forcefully improving it, right? Because it's like, well, these cards are not valid anymore. You have to actually put new cards in there, which is ingenious from a marketing standpoint. What's your take on that from where we just came from right now? This discussion.
Oh, the rotation is clearly a marketing godsend for Wizards' bottom line. There's something you also have to be aware of as a consumer of when you select what kind of Magic you're going to play, because that's one of their key things about selling Magic to a new person. Mm-hmm. It's not just you're playing Magic the Gathering. It's that it's a set of cards and a set of rules that can be customized into a whole bunch of different rule sets that can be applicable to any sort of budget, so that you can play Vintage, you can play Legacy, you can play old school EDH 1994 and earlier, but you can also play just the all commons, just the stuff that was released this year. This is where standard and modern can be beneficial, but you have to plan for it and know what you're getting into.
Right. And so let's jump into it. Okay, so Magic War of the Spark. I want to call it, because the hashtag is MTG War. So like I've been tweeting about it all day, and I've been saying MTG War all day. So like I keep wanting to call it MTG War, but War of the Spark, the newest expansion, is coming out. Pre-release is this weekend, and so let's talk about it. Like, should people buy a pre-release? Should they jump into that? Like, what is that? What determines that? Is it their raw budget? Is it like, should they try to find some kind of value in some other way? Like, what is your take? And then I'll give my take. So you start with what your ideas are, and then I'm going to give what I think they should do.
Well, it's a combination of both. I'm just coming at it from the point of, if you are not fiscally able, or it would be irresponsible of you for you to drop between $25 to $40 to go to either a midnight launch or a launch on one of the weekend days. Mm-hmm. And it's not just financially easy for you to sit down for 4 to 6 hours and sling cardboard. Mm-hmm. Then as a baseline, that's going to be problematic unless your financial situation is strong enough that you can afford to invest the $40 and 6 hours of your time, because mm-hmm. you enjoy playing with the cards, you enjoy being in the social environment, you enjoy being in the game store. You have to derive extra value from the social interaction that's just can't be attributed to a price tag.
Yeah. What I'll say is this. In this podcast, I don't want to tell people, look, dude, get financially responsible and stop messing around. I'm not your dad. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, okay? You could do whatever you want, okay? But if you are trying to save money and you are trying to kind of rope in the money that you're spending, I think that one thing you can do is you don't have to be part of a pre-release, even though pre-releases are awesome. And I'll be honest, like, if there's one event that you want to be part of, it's probably the pre-release. Okay, and the reason why...
It's going to be pre-release. They are bonkers. They're awesome.
Right. It's like, first of all, it's really fun. And you're playing with a mix of people, which is great. So, like, if you can budget for a pre-release, I would say you should definitely try to get into a pre-release. From a financial perspective, though, the cards are worth the most at the pre-release. For players, at least. Okay, for vendors like me, they're worth the most, like, while I'm pre-selling them, right? But, like, for players, they're worth the most at a pre-release. So you're, like... your ratio to like value that you're going to get out of those cards and money you're going to spend is really good, because a lot of times they're doing deals on pre-releases so they can get people in the door. They don't want to have a dead pre-release, so a lot of times they're doing sales on that stuff. You usually get more than your money's worth in the pre-release package. So let me say this, a couple of things. Number one, if you can afford it, you should do it. If you can't afford it, or if you decided, hey, I'm doing this budget thing that you guys talked about and it's not in my budget, you can do these kind of things. There's lots of product that happens at pre-release. You can buy a box at pre-release. You can buy extra kits at pre-release. All of that stuff. So I would talk to a friend of yours who is going to pre-release, right? Who is going to spend money on a box or whatever. And I would just tell them, hey, look, I can't afford to buy the pre-release, but would you accept some trade? Like, what if I trade in your favor? Like, you take my binder, you take a bunch of stuff out, and then you give me some packs and we can draft later. Or you get a pre-release pack and we'll battle sealed. You get me a pre-release kit, bring it. Like, next time we hang out, we'll battle sealed on the with the pre-release kits, and I'll just trade you for that stuff. And if you make that offer to most Magic players who love value, they're going to rather just go in your binder and take out the stuff, right? They'll be like, yeah, if you're going to trade my favor, sure. I've been wanting this stuff for my EDH deck, blah, blah, blah. And there's no shame in that. I think that's a totally way to use your resources to basically buy a pre-release kit. Now, you can do that with the store as well. So you can bring your binder and say, hey, what are you buying? And then, let me get a pre-release kit with it, or let me get a box with it. Now, that's not going to have as much value passed to you than doing it with your friend, right? Because your friend, you can trade in their favor, but you're not going to be giving them as much as you're going to be giving a store, mostly. It depends on who your friends are, though, I guess. What do you think about that idea, Zuko? Do you think it's a good idea?
Yeah, that's pretty equitable. As long as both parties know, hey, I'm going to be getting just a little bit fairer deal on these cards in the short term, but you're getting a pre-release at a discounted price. You're playing with the new cards. It's a new experience. Still hanging out at the store, either with new people or the same old people that have been there before. It's a home run.
Yeah. So Amar is joining us, and just for those of you who are watching on YouTube and whatnot, we're doing this live on Twitch. Okay, so if you want to, I'll put the link in the description. I don't think I did that last time, but I'll put my Twitch, video, what was it called? Twitch channel. I'll put my Twitch channel in the link in the description for you, so you can see these things live if you want. This is not a podcast. The name of this is not another podcast, and we are trying different formats, different people, and I think one day I am going to do a podcast, but we don't know what it's going to look like. So this is all experimental, And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to try these experiments. I hope you like the experiments. All that to say, we have a live audience. And so Amar is one of the regulars, and he's super, super smart when it comes to Magic finance. And he works, I think, I don't want to missay this, but I believe he owns a store. And so, and I don't know if he wants people to know that. So, whoops, if I did. But the deal is, he says that a good store would do a trade just like a player would do a trade during pre-release, because these stores want to make the experience for everyone have fun. Everybody who runs a store has played Magic. I would say most, like 90%, 98%. So they know what it's like, and they're going to give you, the good stores will give you like a good deal, so that you can play, right? And
one of those stores, perfect.
Yeah, and if you're not one of those stores, don't be a scumbag. Just do the right thing. Come on, it's pre-release, man. It's pre-release. Come on.
Everyone wins at pre-release. Come on.
Everybody wins. Come on. We love pre-release. So okay, so that stuff is coming out. Use your resources. Utilize what you have to try to get what you want. And now, let's say pre-release is off the table. Okay, so like maybe you're working, maybe like you don't want to go to a pre-release, but you want a bunch of the cards that are in War of the Spark, right? Well, everybody wants some of it, right? I want some, you want some. Now, what's your typical strategy, Zuko, when you want cards from a new set? What do you usually do? How do you do it?
When I usually am wanting a certain card or a certain set of cards, I'm always on the lookout for if players open them during their pools, and if they are not interested in them for their own collection. For example, there was at the most recent Ravnica Allegiance one, there was a whole bunch of breeding pools that were open, and not a whole lot of players are into playing those colors either in their casual games or in store events. So I was able to trade for the breeding pools at a better rate than I would if I was trading with someone who really wanted the value of the breeding pool.
So what you're saying is that trading is a little more casual. So so what you're saying is like, okay, so if we can like generalize this and not say like this is exactly what I did, but what you would say is that the cards that you want from the new set, you want to trade for those at pre-release. That's what you're trying to do.
I just want to get, just because for my player profile of I just hold the cards, like I just get the cards and I hold them. Uh-huh. There's not that much volatility and trading back and forth. There's not that much volume. For me, it's more valuable just to get the cards as soon and as early as I can, and then just play with them for as long as I'm going to play with them.
Do you buy them or do you trade for them?
Depends on who has what.
Okay, so if you get there, you try trade at pre-release, and then they don't have them, do you just try to buy them that night, or like buy them as soon as possible?
Pretty much, either from the person themselves when we're not on store property, or from the store themselves if the card gets traded in.
Okay, all right, cool. So Zuko has an approach where he wants the cards like right now, and I do the same thing, because like I have a bunch of projects, and maybe we'll have time to talk about the projects and how I enjoy Magic that is not very costly, but I do want the cards for my projects like as soon as possible so I can put them in there, because I've been thinking about them the whole time, and I'm like, I just want to put them in the box, or I want to put them in the deck. That's what I want to do. But what I think the better way to approach it is, and no shade to anyone who does like me and Zuko, because look, we're the ones hosting the cast and we're doing the bad things, so it's okay. But one thing that I would say that you could do is just wait. One of the things that Zuko mentioned is at pre-release, this is one of the greatest things. There's tons of chaff. Okay, so people do a draft, they do a pre-release pool, they're just like, this stuff is junk, I don't want it. So they'll just leave it on the table. Okay? And this is like a budget player's blessings, okay? Because in that chaff, it's so many like commons and uncommons that you definitely want for the set. Like, I think last set there was what's the blue-green card where it has flash and it's an instant? It doesn't have flash. It's an instant, and you can and you could put a land in play and draw a card. Oh, Growth Spiral.
Yeah. Growth Spiral, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted a handful of those for like my EDH decks and some other stuff. I just like that card. It's just so cool, so efficient. And so like people were leaving them in stacks on the table at pre-release. And I was just like, yes, like I want these Growth Spirals, I want these, other things. And so that's something to look out for. It feels a little bit like, oh, I'm dumpster diving, but for some people. But I think that it's a good way. And if you wait till after pre-release, because everybody wants the card so badly, that once you're past that point, people are less, they care less about the card, right? And so you can often get better deals after pre-release. Now, of course, let me warn you, one of the things is that, hey, Flip Dog, thank you for the follow. One of the things is that after pre-release, after the first week, okay, the first tournament of the release, there's going to be a card that was undervalued that did well in the tournament that's going to spike. So if you wait, yeah, you might get burned by that situation. So have you ever been burned by something like that, Zuko, like waiting and then getting like owned on how much it cost afterward?
Usually it's the opposite direction. Like when I opened a valuable planeswalker like Jace the Mind Sculptor, and everyone else wanted them so bad, I was able to just get the cheap fetch lands then. So I've never had one where I've just sat on the card for so long that it then crashed, because the market thing of it crashing was irrelevant to me, because if I was holding on to it, it was in a deck. So.
Yeah, you're just going to keep it forever anyway, so it doesn't matter. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think one of the things that Amar pointed out in the chat, and I think it's a great point to bring up to everybody who's listening, is if you open a foil Planeswalker, you should trade it or sell it before you leave the store. And one of the reasons for that is that all of these things are going to kind of be overpriced, and it's a good time to cash in. Now, I know it's shiny and it's neat. I would even venture to say, even if it's a foil Planeswalker that you kind of want, you should probably still sell it or trade it and then get it after it drops down. So from a financial perspective, that's probably the smartest thing to do on that stuff.
Agreed.
So I'm going to look at the section we have here. We talked a little bit about Limited. We talked about Draft Chaff and how you can, play in that space. Let's get out of the Mythic Edition and whatnot. There's a couple things I want to talk about with that stuff. I just want to put it out there. because each set now has a Mythic Edition, and this Mythic Edition that's coming out is like, you cannot lose. You cannot lose by buying this Mythic Edition because of two things. Number one, it has ridiculous Planeswalkers in it, headlined by Ugin and Jace the Mind Sculptor. Okay, those two alone are going to be worth the $250 that you pay for the box. Now, I know not everybody has has $250, and I know that, I know this isn't for everybody, but the people who can't afford to spend $250 on that box, you should do it even if you don't want it, because it's going to be worth much more after. The second reason is not only the big Planeswalkers, but also they gave us the print run. So they told us 12,000 units and that's it. And there's not going to be any reprints. So it's just kind of one of those things that it's going to happen. You're going to buy it and then you're going to be able to sell it for so much more money, probably $100 more or plus, plus that. And so that's a tip there. Gideon Spellbook is in a similar place where they are distributing it based on the store's WPN metrics. And what that means is that, some stores will get less. And so it's not just buy as much as you want. It's just you're going to get what you get for being a store at this metric. And the other thing with Gideon is the MSRP versus the actual value is just way low. And so, like, if you can buy this for MSRP, you should definitely buy it, use it as trade fodder, use it to resell it and get what you need. That's one of the things, I think that's one of the core things that I used to do, is I used to look for opportunities like this. I would buy something that I knew was going to go up, like, or just doesn't not go up, but like, I mean, Gideon Spellbook, if you buy it for $25, you've already got, like, I think the value right now is like $70 in cards. So you already have $70, you spent $25. Now all that stuff's going to go down, but even if it takes like a 25% hit, right? What is that? Like 1750 off 70. So like, even if it takes $20 hit, right? It's $50 for $25, right? So like, you look for opportunities like that, and I'm not even okay. So Amar says he's not sure if Gideon Spellbook has an MSRP. I'm not sure either. I thought I saw $25. Maybe that was in the IGN article or whatever, the Polygon article that released it. But what I will say is that
25.
What's that?
I know that my local store is selling it for 25, and it's already gone.
Yeah. See, so some people took advantage of that. They saw, okay, $25. Boom, I'm going to buy those copies, and then I'm going to leverage that. Maybe I saw 25 on the vendors, on the distributor's website, is like suggested retail or whatever. So, I'm going to leverage that to get the cards that I need. So like, if you can get this Gideon Spellbook and then sell some contents for $25 and then put the other stuff in your trade binder, then you just have free value that you can use later to trade into stuff for your EDH decks or other things. And so there's a bunch of stuff we want to talk about. I'm not sure where we want to go right now. I hope that this advice about the War of the Spark pre-release, War of the Spark coming out, and these different products that are coming, I hope that what we've talked about so far is helping you or helpful. I'd like to talk about some of these other ways that you could play Magic that kind of help you out in this thing. Do you think that's a good idea, Zuko?
Let's get into it.
All right. So we know that one way to play Magic is Standard, right? But what's the problem with Standard, Zuko?
Problem is that it rotates and the cards are overly inflated on price because it's a small life, it's a small life format, and the card values are extremely volatile.
Right. And so like, Standard is a small card pool, and things that affect Standard have a tendency to affect prices very volatilely. So like, getting into Standard and spending money on an expensive card, that card might fall out of flavor, and then you lose value on it, and then eventually the cards that you're investing in rotate. Okay, and so it's a losing proposition to play Standard from a financial perspective. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't play standard. All you have to understand is that there's going to be a cost associated with standard that isn't going to hold its value, right? So it's not an investment to play standard. So like some formats you can look at like an investment. Like if you're playing old school, a lot of those are reserve list cards that are not going to be reprinted. So, it's kind of an investment to play that format because every time you buy a card, you're probably gonna sell it for more than you bought it for. With standard, it's not like that. When you buy cards, you expect them to go down. So, taking this back to the budget situation, you got to understand like you're going to be losing X amount of money every standard rotation, and see if that's part of your budget. If your budget can absorb rebuying in. Now, some of the things that people do to avoid this is they pick an eternal format like EDH or Commander, as it's well known now. Commander is like the premier eternal format right now because I think it's the best format. But let's not be what do you call that? Let's not bias. Right?
Let's not get too soapboxy.
Yeah, I don't want to preach at you, but like, even though I read you a Bible verse earlier, I don't want to preach at you about Commander, but I think it is the best eternal format. But some other eternal formats or non-rotating formats are like Legacy, Vintage, and I will say Modern, but I personally don't consider that an eternal format. And the reason why is because Wizards is very hands-on with the ban list in Modern. And so like, yeah, it doesn't rotate, but Wizards ban stuff all the time. And so that's like a rotation.
Down in value like a rock. Or Sword of the Meek Thopter Foundry, just Sword of the Meek went sky high.
Right. So like if you unban something, boom, and so there's some tension there. And I will bring up this other thing that Amar's saying. Like I said, super smart guy. And what he says is you never invest in standard cards. You invest in the tournaments. Events are where you see your returns, even more so with Wizards push for standard being the only format that matters for LGSs. So like what he's saying is that when you buy the standard cards, what you're doing is you're investing it to participate in the tournaments, where if you're a good player you will reap the benefits. But I never was able to go infinite by playing standard. I did once though with the F&M Hero article series. If you want to read about that from years ago. You
have to know you are a winning player in the store and/or stores that you're playing at. If you're like a new player and you're in a room full of like PTQ grinders who've been doing this for like 6+ years, you have to really enjoy the social aspect of the game because you're just getting killed in the tournament standings and you're getting killed on the tournament buy-ins.
Right. And remember, we're only talking about finance here, or not finance, but how to spend your money. Now, if you want to improve as a Magic player, you should play against those PTQ grinders. Okay, you're going to learn a lot. If this is totally for fun, you should do that. So, it's all about what you want out of the game, And so we're just saying, hey, if you happen to prioritize not going broke, these are some of the things you should consider. But getting beat up by somebody who's like really good at the game, that's good learning, whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah, especially when Magic Online was the only online client that we had and not Magic Arena. Yeah, you're setting money on fire just by getting your head smashed in, but you're improving as a Magic player so much.
Right. Now, one thing I want to say, okay, so we talk about these non-rotating formats like Modern and Legacy, Vintage, and, something like EDH or Commander. Now, you have come up with some of the numbers. We're going to jump to the numbers, and then we'll tail back to some of these other formats you can play, which I'm going to give you a little treat here because one of these formats is excellent, and everybody should have one of these, in my opinion. But that's a teaser. It's a teaser for the future. Tell us about these numbers. So if you're going to play in Standard, how much money do you have to consider for having a deck?
It depends on which deck you're getting. At the time when I did this research about 2 months back, this was when Mono Blue was still a thing before Autumn Burn Burkett won the Invitational. So at that time, the mono blue deck, it's just the cards itself were like $90, shy of 100 if you have to ship them.
Okay.
The average standard deck, which is it Drake's, all the control variants, all the Nexus variants, and who knows how these prices are going to fluctuate after War of the Spark metagame settles out. But historically, standard decks are typically between $200 and $300.
Okay. And now remember, you might have to rebuy that after rotation. So, depending on how expensive your deck is. So if you have mono blue and it's $90, you're going to lose some amount of cards, and then maybe the deck won't be viable because it loses key cards, which might happen in the mono blue situation because you lose like Storm Tamer and you lose Tempest Djinn and stuff like that. And so losing that stuff is like really critical to the deck, so you probably have to build a new deck. But same thing with mono red is pretty resilient. So mono red is probably in that range, like 90, $50 to $90.
20, depending on which rare you want spikes.
Yeah. And so like the good thing about mono red is a lot of times those cards are replaceable. It's just like, oh, this one does 3 damage, just put that one in. And so that's something to think about. So decks for standard about 300. What about modern now?
Modern is where things get a bit more spicy because you can get some budget brews that are also in that 200-300 area. But now you're dealing with a much larger, much more older, much more valuable card library. All the old planeswalkers that were busted, all the undercosted removal, all the undercosted creatures. At that point, you're looking at an average of $931, shy of $1,000 to get into a decent modern deck. It may not even be the winning one. It may not have won a tournament in the pro scene for 6 months, but it's still $1,000.
Right. And that's a lot of money to invest. But the cool thing about that is to remember most of the time, and this is one of one of my kind of like things that I don't like about modern is because of the ban list. This is not always true, but most of the time, once you build the modern deck, you're just iterating on it a little bit every set. There's not a bunch of cards that come out and just like blow your modern deck away. That also might change with Modern Horizons, but what I will say is in the past, what it's been like is you've been able to build a modern deck and keep it. Like the people who built Affinity when Modern first came out, maybe they bought some of those green enchantments now and whatever, a couple of Arcbound workers or whatever now. And now they're Hardened Scales Affinity, but they're still Affinity, right? And they have their Arcbound Ravagers, that kind of stuff. And, the people who were playing, green black, they invested in their Lilianas. Liliana's still good in modern. People who play Tron, as many people that wish that they did not exist. There are those Tron players who picked up Tron and they can just play, it's taken different variants. There was a mono blue Tron and now there's mono green Tron and this kind of stuff. And, Tron, the switching from one variant to another is oftentimes not very expensive. And so $900, that's a pretty significant investment, but you won't have to rebuy every rotation, which is kind of the...
It's very similar like when a new set comes out, it's very similar to, say, Commander, where it depends on how vast your Commander deck library is, but at most per set, you're looking at between 1 to 3 cards. Maybe there's a new cycle of lands that you want, but out of the 200 to 300 cards that comes out of every set, you're only looking at between 3 to 5 that can impact modern as a whole. And maybe your deck doesn't even have any of the new cards in it. Maybe 1 or 3, if that. So it's decent. It's far better as a long-term prospect than standard. But again, you're still liable to when Wizard swings the Banhammer. Deathrite goes from 40, now it's maybe 10, crawling back up to 25. Sword of the Meek, it gets unbanned, skyrockets, and it's now coming back down a little bit. It's a little bit more of a gamble, but it's also a lot more safe than a standard.
Right, it's safer than standard because standard is inevitable. It's going to rotate, and so things we're talking about might happen in modern. You might get banned. Modern Horizons might blow your deck out of the water. It might. We don't know. But the thing I don't like about Modern are those things, but also it's the closest to Standard, which means that it can be impacted by new cards more easily than these other formats that we're going to talk about, right? Because it's closer to Standard with the card pool, which means that Standard cards can often be powerful enough in Modern where maybe they're not like powerful enough in Legacy, which is the other format, the next format. Now, how much is a Legacy deck going to cost you?
Now we're getting into the real numbers here. This is where all the broken counter spells are. This is where the ABU dual lands are. This is where most of the fetches hang out.
This is the cool format, guys. Okay.
This is for the cool kids. And the cool kids like to spend $2,899 on the average Legacy deck.
Okay. Now, let's talk about Legacy. I like the format. Okay. I'm a fan of the format. So I want to talk a little bit about this number. Okay. $2,899. One thing to remember is a lot of that is your dual lands and your Force of Wills. Okay. If you're playing like a prison deck, it's your City of Traders and your Ancient Tombs. Those are the things that are a lot of times it's real estate in Legacy. Now, there are some more budgety Legacy decks like Death and Taxes. It plays planes, doesn't play dual lands, stuff like that. And what I will even say is a lot of times you can, if you really love Legacy, there's two things. There's events that are proxy. A lot of times local tournaments will be proxy because not everyone owns dual lands. The other thing is a lot of times you can get by with shock lands. And some of these decks even run shock lands. Things like the Death Shadow Legacy deck runs Watery Graves, And so there are ways to get around this number. The great thing about Legacy is not a lot of cards affect Legacy. Okay, so you can I built a Legacy deck in 6 years ago, and I can still play that deck now. The only problem is I can't play with Deathrite Shaman, which I'm sad about. But that kind of banning was a huge banning in Legacy. Like it was unprecedented. Okay, and I think one of the things you can do is some of these formats, like they share cards, and so like some cards are good in all these formats, and they can like Delver of Secrets, is a Legacy card, for example, but Terramander can be played in Legacy, it can be played in Modern, and it can be played in Standard, and so like looking out for these different cards that can be cross format is a good idea. So another example of this is like Death and Taxes, right? Death and Taxes in Legacy has a version in Modern, right? That runs Thalias and things that you would see in Legacy in Modern. So it's often good to like find a deck in Modern that is maybe like similar in Legacy, and then start with the Modern deck, and then slowly build into the Legacy deck. But the reason why that would be a goal is because Legacy does not change. I think Amar here was the one talking about these decks with similar strands in each format. And one of the things he brings up is Eldrazi. Eldrazi is a great example of a deck that's good in Modern and it's good in Legacy. Well, good, it's playable in both. And so I think that Legacy is one of the safer places if you want to be competitive and have a place that you're not going to be spending a bunch of money over and over again. It's a pretty stable format. Now, the other one, you can read the vintage number, but like we're not even going to talk about vintage, but you can read the number. If you want to play vintage.
So should you want to play in your local vintage event that does not allow proxies, let's see, how many digits is that? Oh yeah, $23,282. Moving on.
Not bad. And if you do play vintage, you don't need to know about like financial ways to play Magic because you're fine. You're doing fine. Maybe
you're so far beyond us. Why are you watching?
Right. Maybe you're watching for entertainment, or whatever. But yeah, if you're playing Vintage, Vintage is a great format. I used to play it. I loved it. I can't justify having a deck worth $25,000 in my house. I can't justify it. I got kids to feed, man. I cannot be chilling out with this $25,000 deck. So Amar says, "Hey, Vintage has hate bears." Okay, all right. There are Vintage decks that you can play that does it. In a lot of proxy tournaments, same kind of thing, right? Or you can play Vintage on MTGO, which is about $500, I think, to get all the stuff. So that's another possibility. So beyond these, the format that I like the best that's not rotating is Commander. Okay, Commander is the best format for safe money, and here's the reason. Number one, you can buy a Commander deck for $30, $35. You don't even have to buy the good one. Buy whatever, the artifact one with Saheeli, right? You can buy that deck. You can take it out of the box and have a good time playing with a table of people. You can take another $25, update that deck, and it could be competitive at that table. The great thing about Commander is it's not like other competitive formats where it's 1 versus 1. In the 1 versus 1 formats, deck optimization is super important, because once you slip up in a game, your opponent can take advantage of you. In Commander, there's 3 opponents and 3 allies. Okay? And you don't always look at it like 3 opponents. You should always look at it like 3 opponents or allies, right? If you got land hosed, and you need more land, you can say, "Hey guys, don't beat me up. I don't have land."
We got 3 lands. You guys are already attacking each other. I've done nothing.
Exactly. See, Zuko's got it down. That's it. And then what are you gonna do? You're not gonna be the jerk and be like, "No, take it. Take 5." No, you're like, "Okay, we'll let him get the lands," And this is like the fun of Commander, is that you don't have to have an optimized deck. And it could be a project over long periods of time. And you can enjoy Magic as you play it. And some of the cards they transfer over, like Soul Ring or something like that, And so all of that stuff is, that's why I like the format so much. Because first of all, you're always going to find someone who wants to play Commander. Okay, Commander is inexpensive. You don't need an optimized deck to have fun or to win, either one. I'm selling these decks on Alchemist Refuge, right? AlchemistRefuge.shop. I'll put that in the what is that? The description. I'll put that in the description as well. Some of these decks are like $150. Okay, and we just talked about this modern deck, $900, Legacy $3,000. For $150, you can have like a very focused, strong Commander deck.
That will last you years.
That will last you years, right? And that will win games, and that you'll have fun with your friends. And then you don't ever have to do another thing to the Commander deck. You never have to change it. Of course, new cards are going to come out, and you're going to say, this would go great in my Commander deck. And what do? Spend $5? Spend $10 to upgrade a little card? I think that's the best. I think that's pound for pound the best way to spend your money in Magic. I think, yes, I'll say pound for pound, that's the best way to spend the money. But there are other things you can do. Amar wants to add some more. We should just have Amar into the chat, because he has a lot of good things to say, right? So next time Amar will get you in the cast, but you do have to get a mic and a video camera to do this. So he says best Magic finance advice ever is to buy Commander decks every year. That's the other cool thing, is that first of all, the value of those decks hold, but even forget about the value. A lot of times you can buy like all 4 Commander decks for $100 or $120. And like, instead of buying a box every set, maybe just buy Commander decks every time they release, every 3 months or whatever. They release every year, right? Every year, buy the 4 Commander decks. And then your Commander collection will grow. It'll be great,
$150 just for 1 year, that's better than anything else I've done price-wise, aside from just the free cards and all the commons.
Right. So there's two other formats we want to talk about before we move on. and maybe answer some questions from chat and whatnot. But the other two things you can do is you can build a cube, and there's lots of variants of cubes. You can buy these cubes, right? We found some information about the cubes, right, Zuko?
Card Kingdom sells a standard cube. I say standard, I don't mean from the standard set, but a pretty stock, very stable, very playable cube that they sell for sub $200. And that's in excess of like 360 cards, plus the basic lands that you need. And again, you only have to update a few cards, if any, per set. Very slow to change outside of your play group, unless one of you wants to buy or build another cube that's a different one. And they're always flexible per price point. You've got the all commons cube, which I used to have until I sold mine because I wasn't getting games in with it, and I was able to sell it for like maybe $25 because I only paid $20 to get the whole thing assembled, aside from all the sleeves that you would need.
with the common cube, it's probably like
there's the Draft All-Stars cube, commons and uncommons, all the best of from your limited sets. These are your Flame Tongue copies. These are your Frilled Mystics. These are all the good draft cards. And then it scales all the way up to, you can easily spend over 50 grand, twice as much as a vintage deck, to get the all foil, all altered, all signed, premium, all the good cards.
Right. You could spend a lot on a cube, and you can spend a little, like you did, $25. The sleeves cost more than the cube, you know? And so I think one of the troubles with cube, it's hard to get people to cube with you. So like a lot of times you want to fire like an 8-man draft with cube. It's hard to do that. You can do like, what is it, Rochester draft? Is that what it's called? When you can.
There's a couple of like 2 to 4 player draft formats that Wizards has done for the Invitational that they used to do, or that have been created by the community. But there's still the thing of, you gotta take the cards out, you gotta shuffle them if they're not already pre-shuffled, and you gotta draft the cards in some fashion, whether that's Winchester, Rochester, Solomon, a typical 6 or 4-man. It's still a large time investment just to take the cards out, then get the cards drafted out, then deck build, and then get games in. It's a lot faster to just say, hey, you want to get a Commander game in? Sure, here's my deck, shuffle, and we're off to the races.
Right. There's a lot of setup time with a cube, and this is why I like this next format. I discovered this from my friend. It's actually one of the things that kind of got me back into Magic, and it's called Battle Box. Now,
I'm going to let you do this one because I don't know much about Battle Box, and I know that you're a big Battle Box aficionado.
Do you really not know much about it, or are you just saying that to pass the... Okay. He doesn't know much about it, and I'm the aficionado, so let's talk about it. So the Battle Box is also called the Danger Room, and it was designed by Brian DeMars, and it was designed to... The reason it was designed was to test, I guess, for pros to play their limited game. Okay, so they would test their limited game in between pro tours with this Battle Box, and the way it plays is each player gets a set of lands that are off to the side, and then there's this box of cards. You shuffle it up, you put it in the middle, and you just play from the top of it. I like that because the setup time is like 0. You say, here's your set of lands. They're usually in different color sleeves. Here's my set of lands. Shuffle, boom, we start playing. You draw like 3 or 4 cards depending on the Battle Box, and then you just play your hand. And the reason you draw 3 or 4 and not 7 is because there's no lands in the Battle Box. You have perfect mana because the lands are off to the side. And I really like this because it's like a board game. You build the Battle Box how you want, the environment that you want. And I've built multiple Battle Boxes. I've built... it's kind of like a stack with lands, but you have to play the lands every turn, or you don't have to, but you play them, you know. And so, hey, look at Zuko. What's up, Zuko? Welcome to the stream. Thank you for being here. So I made that joke because Zuko said something in chat, and I always see Zuko's name in chat but now he's actually on the stream with us. So
It's very confusing.
it was amusing. You had to be there for that one. So, anyways, back to the battle box. It's the setup time is like a board game in the sense that you just shuffle it, you put the lands aside, and you play. And I've built so many different versions of battle box. I built a commander version, which I'm now refining a little bit, and I'm excited to see how that turns out. And then I've also built a regular battle box, which is like the common, uncommon, low power level, grindy battle box. But the one that I play the most that I really love is the Zoo battle box, which is the most efficient creatures and spells in Magic. Everything is 3 mana or less, unless it can be alternately cast like Gush or something like that. And I really enjoy that battle box. It's pretty crazy. But the reason I bring this up in this podcast about playing Magic without going broke is in the same way that you build a cube and don't ever have to alter it, you can build a battle box and have so much fun. Hours and hours of fun. No games are the same. It's always fun. It's especially if you build it right. It's got lots of deep decision making and lots of great things. And you can still have the fun of saying, oh, a new set came out. I'm going to get some cards for the battle box. Like Feather is going to go in the Zoo battle box because it's 3 mana. It's a 3/4 flyer, which is just awesome. Now, it does other stuff, but who cares? Like, that other stuff is irrelevant when you're looking at, the stats on it. It's really good in the battle box. But also I have things like, the domain card that gives a +5/+5, right? So that with Feather is just going to be nuts because you're going to give it like +5/+5.
God, his fight with Feather, oh
you're
Lord.
Get it back, it's going to be gross. But, but anyways, this is a way that you can build something that doesn't take as long to set up as a cube, doesn't take as many people. You can play one-on-one. You can have 2 land sets because what usually happens is when you start playing Battle Box, people come over and be like, what's that? And you're like, oh, it's Battle Box. And if you just hand them a land set and hand somebody else a land set and say, all right, go, you just split the deck and give them half the deck and you're playing the other half. It's great. It's a lot of fun. One of my favorite formats. EDH is probably my favorite format. The next one would be Battle Box. So
How many cards are in a typical Battle Box?
There's mini battle boxes, there's full battle boxes, there's all that stuff. So one of the things that you can, so to answer the question, it's anywhere from like 200 to like 500 for a battle box. But like what I will say is the less amount of cards you have, the more control you have over the environment, because the more likely you are to see the cards that you put in the battle box. Whereas if you have like a 500 card battle box, it's harder to balance because one of the, like, I don't want to make this a battle box cast, but one of like the tenets of battle box design is to try to make sure that all your cards are evenly power leveled, which sounds weird, right? But like if you have a 2 mana 2/3 flyer, then you shouldn't have a 2 mana 3/3 flyer, because what will happen is that someone will draw the 2 mana 3/3 and then the other person may draw the 2 mana 2/3, and then it's just instantly outclassed by the same card, right? The same. So like a lot of times you have to balance and make sure that your stuff is balanced. So if you try to do that over 500 cards, it's very difficult to make sure that your 5 mana, card is like has these certain kind of stats. Now people do it. It takes a lot of time and a lot of playing and balancing, but it can be done. But I would say start with a small battle box. If you build one, start small. Then you'll feel the changes that you make sooner.
Okay,
Does that make sense? Or
yeah. Would you be selling battle boxes on the Alchemist Refuge anytime soon?
I don't think so. Because they're hard to put together. Like, first of all, from a design perspective, right? Like, I'm building one for Ben Mapes. Because sometimes I just open my mouth and it's not a smart thing to do. So Ben was like, "Yeah, I want to do this thing." And I'm like, "Dude, battle box, man, build a battle box." And he's like, "Okay, can we build a Pauper battle box?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'll design a Pauper battle box and build it for you." Well, this thing has been sitting in my office. I worked on it for quite a bit, and it's not there yet. It's almost there, and then it's been in my office for months. And so I don't want to do that to alchemistrefuge.shop because I want to get some more items up there, and it's super hard with these EDH decks even because I'm testing them, and once you test them, you have to get all the cards. And so like same thing with the battle box. Like I have a design for the Zoo battle box, but that's like I don't know how much money in cards. There's like Tarmogoyf in there. There's a Bob. It's yeah, it's well over like I don't know. It's like $2,000 probably for that battle box. So no one is going to go on AlchemistRefuge.shop and buy a $2,000 battle box. And I could do the common one. I could build the Pauper battle box and sell it on Alchemist Refuge, but I don't know. I don't know if there's a market for that. I'm not sure people are interested in that too much. And again, it's like especially when you do like a Pauper battle box, the cards are going to be worth less than the sleeves probably. And so like if you want to sell it with sleeves, it's like triple the price of the battle box what it would be for people to just build it, right? And then you don't want to sell it without sleeves because then it's like, oh, here's your
card. Where's the sleeves?
Right,
It's
here's
a
your
5 cent.
product. A bunch of cards in a box. That's not fun. So Zuko, was there anything that you think we left out in talking about this kind of topic, how to play Magic and not go broke?
I think that pretty much covers it.
Does anybody in the chat have questions about this? And also, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment because nobody leaves comments on my videos. And, I'm not mad about that. But I have plenty of time to answer comments since nobody leaves them. So it's a good opportunity for you to get in there with a question, if you've made it this far.
Now's your time. Seize the moment.
Seize the day. All right, so this doesn't look like there's any questions coming in from the chat. So if you do have questions, feel free to ask them in the YouTube chat or the YouTube comments. And I just want to thank Zuko for coming up with a sweet topic, coming on the Not a Podcast with me.
Pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it's been great talking about this. Hopefully you guys got some tips. Try your best to budget well and, don't be afraid of handouts, man, or making some trades or, doing some things that don't involve money, And I think Magic players are good at doing that. So I think we're gonna at the very least, we're gonna cut the cast here. And so this is goodbye, but I don't think we're going to end the stream. I think we're going to still stream on. So, hey, if you were here, you could have seen the rest of the stream. All right, bye-bye. But streamers, stick around. Everyone here, stay right here. Don't go anywhere.